In a roundabout fashion, we've come to the interesting question and problem of justifications that don't line up with the methods that were used to actually make the decision. Now, I focus on this methodologically, but we generally identify this either in terms of an ethical praxis, what we generally point at when we say hypocrisy, or more a qualitative praxis, where the conclusions themselves or the ideas themselves that we use to justify a decision and what was actually involved in the decision-making process itself are not the same. Even if justification was a component of that decision-making process, it is necessarily not all-inclusive. All of this to say that very often we find ourselves in a position where how we defend a decision and how we made a decision are very, very different. And that's not necessarily a problem. I know we're fond of seeking consistency in all things, and especially when it comes to ethical matters, matters of integrity, how we relate to other people, how we relate to the consequences that our actions have on other people and the consequences that their actions have on us. We often look for consistency. We seek after consistency. We generally hold consistency in high regard, particularly when it comes to other people. We point to somebody and say that, they walk the walk, that their actions are consistent with their ideologies or beliefs. However, when it comes to the justifications for our actions, how we would explain our actions or our ideas or our convictions to other people, and the processes that brought those decisions to bear, the things that we were considering when we were making those decisions, or the far more nebulous and intuitive processes by which we come to ideas, come to believe ideas, or come to hold convictions. That consistency seeking has to be mitigated with an appreciation of just how many different fields we're straddling. If I say that the justifications for an action and the thought process that brought them to that action are very different, it's tempting, almost reflexive, to make a moral evaluation of that statement, or to view that statement itself as a moral evaluation. For the moment, let's try to sidestep that by looking at the question purely from a standpoint of engineering, viewing justification, decision, selection, all of these different processes, as structured, self-structured exertion of will over forces, whether internal or external. From an engineering standpoint, justification and decision are radically different. Justification may be a factor in decision, but in no way could we analogize them. They do different things. They serve different functions. Their contents are necessarily different, even at the conclusion of process. Their mechanics are radically different, so much so that it's only through the general erosion of meaning, or the smoothing over of detail that linguistic process allows, that we can analogize them at all. How we justify our behavior and how we inform our behavior cannot be congruent. It's not possible. In much the same way that formal logic does not have a process for accounting for the origins of a proposition, and is not particularly concerned with the origins of a proposition, justification, the language of justification, rhetoric of justification, has very little concern for where decisions come from. In a way, demanding consistency between the process that led to a decision, the decision itself, and the justification for a decision, is trying to make the moment of decision, the moment of action itself, into a mirror, saying that that which comes on one side of it is reflected on the other side of it. Which begs the question of what the decision actually changed. If that which leads up to a point of animated engagement with environment, the forces and factors thereof, is mirrored by that which follows, then what was the action? Did the action actually take place? This also begs the question of the integration of the process of decision in the person so deciding. That if we are the same person, if our internal processes are directly analogous, perfectly congruent, after we have done a thing, than they were in the process, the steps that led us up to that thing, up to doing that thing. To what degree have we actually integrated the consequences of that decision? What's more, and where it gets very finicky, is that even when justification is prioritized in the process of making decision, when it's very, very much on our minds, when we're thinking about how we are going to do a thing, how we're going to navigate a particular problem, when we are thinking right up front how we're going to go about explaining why we did what we did, we are doing so from a position fundamentally unlike the one that we will be in when we provide said justification. We are doing so from a set of anticipated consequences, anticipated factors, which in a way makes some sense. We do, after all, try to make decisions with some anticipation of what those decisions will bring about. The back and forth of sequence and temporal context involved in that process is enough to make even the most elaborate of science fiction time travel plots seem just ridiculously simple, laughably simple. So the question is, why do we do it? Well, how do we do it? Often by just leaping straight over these questions of a temporal self, a temporal deciding self, or for that matter the questions of the domains of justification and the domains of decision, or the nature of decision, the nature of action. We generally just hop straight over these problems entirely, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But once we start engaging in the process of actively investigating our thoughts and our emotions, actively evaluating, these questions do come up, or should come up.